I notice from media reports that there's a growing chorus of voices in the West criticising Qatar, which is hosting the World Cup, which is due to take place very shortly. For example, the London Times reports, and I quote, "An official ambassador for the Football World Cup in Qatar has described homosexuality as a form of, quote, damage in the mind during a German television interview, before he was swiftly cut off by a media advisor. The Arab state, where homosexuality is punishable by up to 3 years in prison, has struggled to fend off criticism of its record on LGBTQ rights." Khalid Salman, a retired Qatari football star who is one of the ambassadors for the World Cup, has underscored this tension with his remarks on gay rights. In an interview with ZDF, a German public broadcaster, Salman, 60, acknowledged that, quote, "Many things will come into this country in the course of the World Cup. Let us talk about gay people, for example," he said. "The most important thing is that everyone accepts they are coming here, and they would have to accept our rules," unquote. And the Times continues. He added that he was worried Qatari children might see gay men and learn, quote, "something that is not good," unquote. Asked why homosexuality was banned in his country, Salman said it was haram, an Arabic term meaning forbidden under Islamic law. Now, this is very interesting, and there's been a whole rash of articles, BBC, Guardian, The Times, and many other media platforms criticising Qatar for its views on so-called LGBTQ rights. And this struck me as particularly significant. What does it tell us about what's going on in the world? Well, firstly, it tells us that the West believes it's right and superior in the secular liberal value system that it has, and that everywhere else in the world, especially Muslim countries, must follow the West and do as the West does in its ever-changing, ever-evolving value system. It can never stay still for long. There's always a new moral code and new attitudes and new mores that we in the West are expected to adopt, and everywhere else, by extension, must also accept. And this points to the asymmetry of power in the world, of course. But more seriously than that, it suggests that the West does not respect Islamic morality. It completely ignores this. I noticed this, that in the media reports, the word Islam rarely appears, but the teaching of Islam is directly contradicted and condemned repeatedly. But what is this teaching? And I notice in the media, at least as far as I see it, I rarely see an informed discussion of exactly what Islamic law teaches on this subject of homosexuality. But just to scratch the surface, it's easy to find out. There's plenty of resources online and books that teach the truth about this. The first thing that people in the West don't seem to realise is there is no agreed upon punishment for homosexual acts. For example, the Hanafi school traditionally has said that there is no capital punishment for homosexual acts. Often it's left to the discretion of the judge, the Qadi, for example. The other schools, the Hanbali, do mandate the death penalty for homosexual acts. This is true, but the most commonly followed school, the Hanafi school, does not. But what are we talking about here? I'm sorry to get a bit explicit, and there's an explicit warning here. What are we talking about when we're talking about homosexuality precisely? Well, the Sharia seems to be concerned, in the main, with something in Arabic called liwat. Liwat. You can look it up. What does it mean? Well, an English equivalent, a translation, will be sodomy. That's what it's concerned about, this particular act. Now, the Sharia is concerned with public behaviour, and indeed Salman himself said that. The most important thing is that everyone accepts they are coming here and that they have to accept our rules, and these rules are public rules to do with behaviour, not with private behaviour. This is a quite important distinction that's explicitly recognised in Sharia. So to be a crime in an Islamic context, Qatar being an Islamic society in the sense that it follows many aspects of the Sharia, a particular act, liwat, has to be done in public. This is when it becomes a crime, and be witnessed by 4 people. 4 upstanding witnesses. So they can't themselves have a criminal record or be of dubious character. And then they have to go to court and testify in front of a judge that they witnessed said alleged behavior taking place. And the behavior itself, the act of penetration, is what they have to see. They can't just see 2 people vaguely doing whatever. They have to witness the act itself in a court. And as I say, there's no agreed punishment for this. Now, this is called the hudud punishments, and there's more to be said about them. And they apply to adultery, homosexual acts, and just like 1 or 2 other categories, which we won't go into now. But the central principle in the application of hudud punishments, as they're called, is maximizing mercy. Mercy is the heart of this. And this was clearly formulated, not just a modernist, liberal, kind of humanitarian idea. This was clearly formulated in a hadith. This is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. And it was also echoed by prominent companions, among them his wife Aisha and the caliphs Umar and Ali. And the best attested version of this hadith, because there are several versions, is as follows in English: ward off the hudud from the Muslims as much as you all can. And if you find a way out for the person, then let them go. For it is better for the authority to err in mercy than to err in punishment. End quote. And within a century of the Prophet's death, Muslim scholars had digested this hadith into a crucial legal maxim or legal principle, which is as follows: ward off the hudud by ambiguities. Ward off the hudud by ambiguities. So on the and so different from the Western perception of the enthusiastic application of hudud laws, you're supposed to find a way not to implement them, if possible, to get people off using whatever strategy can be employed. So as I say, there is no agreed upon punishment. The act is supposed to take place in public. There have to be 4 witnesses, and they have to testify in court. Not 3, not 2, not 1, but 4. And if there's just only 3, doesn't matter. You cannot be brought to court. So that's the first thing I want to establish. It's actually virtually impossible to implement hudud punishments in Islamic law, given these quite strict criteria and the bias in the law towards mercy rather than severity. I think that's an important point to grasp. And secondly, I just want to also mention, how can I put this politely, that there seems to be a great disrespect towards Islam in the Western media, whether it be the conservative media or the liberal secular media, that there seems to be a disinclination to accept that other countries, non-Western countries like Qatar and other Muslim majority countries, have a different value system. The West perhaps needs to realize that Muslims have very different views on sexual morality, especially homosexuality. And as a Muslim, Khalid Salman, this chap from Qatar, is surely entitled to express his sincerely held views. And this is not a position that is usually taken in the West. We simply dismiss Muslims and their faith whenever it contradicts the latest secular liberal values. And the problem with these values is they're constantly changing. They seem to, every 10 years or so, or even more quickly, you'll get a new set of ideas and mores and values that the West suddenly embraces. And then it expects the rest of the world, especially Muslim countries, to also accept these values. And if they don't accept them, they can be punished. There can be threats, and people are calling in the West for Qatar no longer to host the Cup, or that it was a mistake to ever give them this because of their so-called stance on LGBTQ rights. But other countries are not treated like this. The West, for example, when it hosts the World Cup, are they taken to task for their foreign policy, for their invasion of Muslim countries, for the numerous casualties and deaths resulting from these invasions and wars that Western countries like America, Britain, France, etc., have been involved in numerous wars in recent years, resulting in the deaths of untold numbers. The very least hundreds of thousands of Muslims have died. Let's not mention Guantanamo Bay. I mean, the list is rather long, unfortunately. Are these countries held to the highest moral standards when it comes to awarding them the World Cup or any other sporting event, tennis or whatever? They're not, are they? And who would enforce it anyway? Who would enforce these rules on America, for example, or Britain? It wouldn't be possible, I would imagine. So this whole episode suggests an asymmetry of power, that the West being at the moment, the hegemonic power, the center of gravity when it comes to political, cultural, and economic power, calls the shots. And it universalizes its morality. It says, well, we now believe in this latest alternative lifestyle as a human right, and therefore you, Muslim countries and everyone else, must also accept it. And if you don't accept it, we will punish you. We will take away your rights to host sports, or we will withdraw foreign aid, or we will sanction you, or we will apply unofficial pressure on you, which certain Western governments, it has been disclosed, do. They do unofficially put very economic pressure on people and political pressure on governments to come into line with the latest Western views. So this whole issue of Qatar hosting the World Cup has opened up this can of worms, unfortunately. And the unwritten text, the subtext, seems to me to be that Muslims can't be Muslims unless they agree with the West's secular liberal ideology. But we're also told at the same time that politics and religion have nothing to do with sports. No. We must get that religion and faith and these have nothing to do with sports, which of course is not true if the religion in question is Islam. And then the West comes in and starts pointing fingers and making accusations. And this strikes me as very unfair and unbalanced and discriminatory, and dare I say it, using the word that's often derided, but nevertheless seems really, really apposite in this context. The word is simple. It is Islamophobia. It's this kind of irrational fear of Islam, not really understanding what Islam actually teaches in detail, and certainly not respecting one of the great faiths of the world and the fastest growing religion in the world as well, the religion of Islam. Anyway, that's my rant. Take it or leave it. Till next time.